All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to go ahead and call our October 22nd, 2025 LEOFF 2 board meeting to order. And as we normally do, let's go ahead and start off with a moment of silence to remember our fallen brothers and sisters, as well as our military members who have passed. All right, thank you very much. Looking at our agenda, we've got a few things that we want to accomplish today, and appreciate the team here putting this all together. Thank you very much. Starts off with just want to make sure, because usually we have our minutes. So we're going to do our minutes at the next meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, next.
We'll
Nope, can't do it. Can't do it.
We'll talk to you about minutes at one of the later board meetings. It was one of the things that the auditor asked is historically, we wouldn't approve minutes like during session, and we wouldn't approve minutes in October. They thought it might be a better practice to approve the minutes monthly so that the minutes can get out on the website sooner, along with all the board materials. But we were going to talk to you guys about that in November, December, as far as your thoughts moving forward. But we didn't make any changes without talking to you guys first.
Okay. So item number 1 is the 2024 valuation key results and projection update. And Mitch is here and looking forward to this. Good morning.
Right, can you hear me? Yes. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Mitch DeCamp, Office of the State Actuary. Yeah, a little bit of a wordy title here today, but we have a 2-part presentation. Part 1 is the 2024 valuation highlights. This is the board's most recent valuation. Completed this a couple months ago. Excited to share some of the highlights from that report. Then part 2 is the projections model update. We're going to take that 2024 valuation, project it into the future, get a sense for what future valuations can look like. Informational only presentation, no board action needed today. As usual, feel free to ask questions at any time. I'll pause for questions as well. You should have received a hard copy report of the 2024 valuation. Quick shout out to Jesse, who pulled all of the pictures that are used in that valuation, actual police and firefighters from around the state of Washington. I think it's pretty cool that we do that, and I think it's the best looking report around. So I wanted to thank her for her efforts. So starting out with part 1, the valuation results. Before we actually get into the valuation results, I want to talk briefly about the difference between valuations and projections, because we're going to talk about both of those today. Valuations, the key note here is that it is a point-in-time snapshot of current plan measures. And what I mean by that is we are taking assets, we are taking membership data as of a specific measurement date, which in this case is June 30th of 2024, and then we are calculating plan measures from that, things like funded status and contribution rates. Now today we're going to talk about, as part of the highlights, we're going to talk about the assets, we're going to talk about that participant data, and we're going to talk about funded status. We are not going to talk about contribution rates today because this is an off-cycle valuation. We don't calculate contribution rates. Think of it more as a funding progress update. After we have those valuations, we're then going to switch over to the projection side of things. And for projections, we take that 2024 valuation, project it into the future to get a forecast of what future valuations can look like. We actually can forecast up to 30 years of valuations. We usually focus on about 5 or 6 years in the future because that's where we have the most clarity. A lot of plan experience can emerge as time keeps unfolding. Assumptions can change and can change these projections. So typically focus on a shorter time period. This gives us a sense for where the plan is going, and we're going to take a look at a projection of funded status when we get there. Okay, so those are the differences between valuations and projections. I'm going to start out with those valuation highlights. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the change in assets for the 2024 valuation. I have a 2-column slide here, starting on the left with the market value of assets. This is what the assets are actually worth in the market on the valuation date. The key highlight for the market value of assets is the investment return. The investment return was 7.95%. That is higher than the assumed or expected return of 7%. So that's positive news for the plan. In terms of dollar amounts, the actual investment return exceeded the assumed return by about $200 million. On the right side is the actuarial value of assets. This is another measure of assets. It's a smooth value of assets. We use that to reduce investment return volatility in plan measures and contribution rates. If we think about the assumed return, 7%, that's a long-term average. We know markets are very volatile, can be up, can be down, and so we want to have some sort of smoothing mechanism so that all of that market volatility doesn't make its way into the contribution rates and plan measures. It does it by deferring the recognition of some of the differences between actual and assumed returns over time. The larger the difference, the longer the smoothing time. The highlights for the 2024 valuation recognize the actuarial value of assets, recognized $255 million in past deferred investment gains. That's positive news for the plan that was recognized in 2024. And then as of this measurement date, still deferring about $1 billion in past investment gains that will be recognized in the future. Here on this next slide, I will show you how we actually calculated that actuarial value of assets. A lot of numbers on this slide. It's okay, you don't have to memorize all of this. I still think it's worth our time to walk through the calculation of this. So I will walk you through the specifics of this table. In the upper right, under 2024 is the market value of assets, that 22,081. That's dollars in millions, so that's about $22 billion in the Left to Trust Fund on the valuation date. Then in the body of the table, we have 5 columns there. On the left is the plan year ending. That's each of the last 4 plan years. The return on assets, that's the market value of asset return for that given year. Years deferred is the number of years that that difference in the actual and assumed return was deferred over. Years remaining is the number of years that are remaining to be recognized, and then the amount deferred is the actual dollar amount that will be recognized over those years remaining. At the bottom of that amount deferred column is the total deferral in that bolded 1,021, again, dollars in millions. So that's just over $1 billion that is currently deferred as of this measurement date. And then under that is the actuarial value of assets, the 21,060. That's the figure that is used to calculate contribution rates and funded status. So a lot of different numbers and calculations and smoothing in this. The key takeaway for the actuarial value of assets is there's $1 billion of positive investment experience that's going to be recognized in the future. As that experience is recognized, it will either increase funded status or offset future negative plan experience. And that's a good place for the plan to be in, is stepping into positive experience instead of stepping into negative plan experience. Shifting from assets over to participant data. Here I have some participant data highlights for you. In the table on the left is the participant data summary. I have it for 2024 as well as the prior 2 years, so you can see some of the trends in the data. I have it also split by active members and annuitants. Active members are members that are currently working as police and fire on the valuation date. Annuitants, members that are receiving a pension benefit. For actives, what we see is, in terms of headcount, we see an increase the last 2 years of about 600 active members in the system. That means as members retire, they are replaced by new members, and the system grew by 600 members. I do have then some averages for salary, age, and service there as well. For annuitants, increase in the number of annuitants. That's expected given where Left 2 is at in its maturity, more people gaining eligibility for retirement, and then ultimately retiring. Have some other highlights in the bullets on the right. First of them, there was higher salary increases for 2024 than assumed. On average, members saw about a 10% increase in salary. Under current plan assumptions, we assumed about 5.5%, so that was higher than we assumed. If you think back last month to the economic and demographic experience study, this is a continuation of some of the trends that we were seeing for those studies, and we were recommending increases in the salary growth assumptions. Next highlight I have is there were about 200 additional retirements than assumed, and that also follows with what we shared for the demographic experience study, where we saw a continued period of higher than assumed retirements and recommending increases in the retirement rates assumption. The last note is on inflation. CPI-based inflation for 2024 was 3.61%. Now, that informed COLAs, or cost of living adjustments, that were paid out of July 1st of this year. Now, that occurred after the valuation date and didn't make any impact on our valuation, but it still happened in 2024, and I still think it's worth it to keep a track of inflation and where it's at. A reminder of how COLAs are paid out. COLAs are capped at 3%, and then any additional over 3% is added to the member's bank, used in future years when inflation is below 3%. This 3.61%, 0.61% would then be added to the member's bank. This follows a period we've seen for the last few years of inflation exceeding that 3% cap.
Mitch, can I ask a question?
Sure.
On the banked part of it, how does an individual know how much they have banked?
I would probably defer to DRS I don't know if there's a way that DRS displays their amount of banked COLA. We do not receive that information for the valuation. We make an assumption about the levels of banks and then the amount of COLAs that are paid out.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, assets, participant data? Yeah, I was kind of thinking that if you jump down the DRS website, you know, and you go to your profile and you have all the information, if you could just see a bank number there, but yeah, I've looked, I haven't seen it, so. Oh, okay, yeah. I have not checked the DRS website. Okay, moving on to the last piece of highlights here, funded status. Quick review of what funded status is. Funded status is comparing the actuarial value of assets to the accrued liability. Accrued liability is the amount of benefits that members have earned as of the measurement date. Funded status is a measure of plan health. It tells us if a plan is on track with its funding goals. Generally, if a plan is at or above 100% funded status, plan would be considered on track with its funding goals. That is exactly what we see with LEOFF 2. Funded status does exceed 100%. In the table here, I have the 2023 and 2024 funded status, and then a reconciliation of the items that impacted funded status between those two valuation dates. So walking through the table, the top, the 2023 funded status was 101.7. Stepping down a line, investment returns and recognizing those past deferred investment gains increased funded status by about 2.7%. Plan experience decreased funded status by 2.6%. 3/4 of that is those higher than assumed salaries that we saw in 2024. So that is the majority of it. Another large portion of it is the higher than assumed retirement. So it's primarily larger salaries and retirements. And then the last one, miscellaneous. When I added up everything else in the table, it came to 0.2%. That gets us to the new 2024 valuation funded status of 101.6%. So just a small decrease in funded status between those two measurement dates. And I'll note that in your hard copy valuation report, this table is in there, but in a lot more detail. So if you're interested in all of this, especially that plan experience bucket broken out into a lot more detail, that is available to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, just a sidebar on this. Any insight as to the additional 200 retirements? Is there any specific driver, financial situation, anything that's unique that should be considered, you know, in future projections on that, or is this just kind of an anomaly?
Yeah, so really good question. When members retire, we don't receive any information on why they retire. We just know they were active the prior year, they are retired the next year. We did obviously look at this in a lot of detail, the number of retirements in the demographic experience study. And this year wasn't a surprise to me in the sense that we saw some additional retirements than we currently assumed. We've seen that for the last 4 or 5 years now. And why that's the case, I think there's a number of factors. members have access to larger benefits with the benefit improvement. I think the pandemic likely pushed some members to retire. There's a plethora of issues that could be pushing members to retire. Because of that experience that we saw in the experience study and then a continuation of that experience, now we are recommending an increase in the retirement rates assumption that you, the board, would still need to adopt. I believe you'll have an option for that adoption in December. That, because we are using current plan assumptions and not those new assumptions, it's not built into this valuation yet. If you were to adopt that retirement rates assumption, it would be built into the valuation, and we'd likely see less of a difference from those higher than expected retirements in things like funded status. So this wraps up the valuation highlights. Any other questions before we shift over to the projection side of things? We're going to take a look at how this funded status will look into the future. Okay, part 2, projections update. First things first, big text slide. Apologize for that. Bear with me on this. I think it's worth it getting some of the background out of the way to set the stage for the projections that we're going to look at. First of all, what are the projections? This is a model that we make in-house at OSA to forecast future valuation results. The key assumption we make is that we assume all future experience will match the current plan assumptions. So salaries, number of retirement rates, investment experience, all will match the current plan assumptions. Now, we know that that is absolutely not going to happen as we project into the future, but it gives us a sense for where the plan is headed. If on average, over the long run, the assumptions are on average accurate, these projections are going to paint an idea of where the plan is going. So I do still, even if all future experience doesn't match those plan assumptions, I still think these projections hold value. Some of the other assumptions we make here: no changes to the currently adopted contribution rates. The board has currently adopted contribution rates through 2029. And that all future contribution rates beyond 2029 would be adopted according to current funding policy. Some other assumptions we do for these projections: make explicit assumptions for new members joining the plan. We make assumptions about the amount of them that come in, what their starting salary is, the male-female split of them. We a ton of additional assumptions there. And then one item that we include that's beyond the 2024 measurement date is we include the actual June 30, 2025 investment return, because we do know that figure now. And that is good news. That is about a 9.5% return. I'm going to show you two different projections. I'm going to show you one without that 9.5% return and then one with, to show you what the impact of that is on the projections. Then the last item, there is a stochastic component to this where we estimate some variability from future investment earnings. We're not going to talk about that at all today. I did just leave it on here so you do know that that exists. We may revisit that sometime next year.
Go ahead, Chris.
Quick question on the assumptions you're making for new members joining the plan and their salaries. Are we including the incentives that are not being offered by a number of employers to attract new entrants into the field or for laterals? Is that included in the assumptions about the salaries?
Yeah, so good question about what we're including in there. We don't explicitly say, hey, we've looked at say new salaries that are provided for new entrants. Typically what we do is we look at a long-term group of new entrants over long periods of time, move them all forward to our most recent measurement date, and then have them join the plan on a projected basis. If to the extent that we are off on that salary projection for new members, we do regularly revisit that assumption and update that profile. And any sort of adjustments we make to our assumptions for current members in terms of salary growth, that flows through to the new entrant growth as well. So we might be off in some of the short term, but it will be caught up at some point in the future. I hope that answers your question.
And then maybe just to follow up, do we capture the recruiting incentives as part of our final average salary calculations?
I do not know that off the top of my head. I would defer to DRS about what piece of that potential.
Those types of incentive pays, DRS makes the decision, and it comes down to the language. So if the incentive is clearly for services rendered, and that tends to be more like a retention, Like, if you stay for the next 2 years, at the end of that 2 years, we're going to pay you a certain amount. That type of incentive payment can be salary. A recruiting incentive, is trickier because that's not for services rendered. Signing up is not considered a service, but depending on how those are worked. So for instance, the signing incentive, if it's set to say, you don't get it on day one, you get it at the end of the year after you've completed a first year of service. Oh, well, then maybe it is included. So there's not one quick answer to say something, just like saying deferred comp, is it in or out? It's all in the how it's structured. Same thing with some of these recruiting and retention incentive payments.
And is somebody actually digging through all the contracts to see how that, I mean, a lot of these are
They're-
partially paid out, day one, year
Yeah,
one, year
they're-
two.
Yeah, so there's a whole unit at DRS that works with employers to answer those questions about what should and shouldn't be reported to DRS as salary, because both the employer and the member have to pay contributions on that. So if they have a question, they contact DRS and DRS will review those agreements and make a decision, and then the employer will report accordingly. If they don't ask, and then it turns out the employer made a mistake, and then later on that gets caught in an audit, or it gets caught by, a review of an individual member account, then DRS will go in and work with the employer to make those corrections, including retroactive.
Sorry
But-
for the rabbit hole, thank you.
No,
I'm gonna go deeper. So I can understand this. So if we have, because I know that most often in the police world, they've been trying to attract new people to come in, and so they've offered these incentives. Usually the incentive is for a brand new employee. And that incentive is in form of some sort of payment, cash. I don't know how they pay it, but it's done probably over a course of a year, or it could be a lump sum. I'm not sure what they're doing. But after that initial dollars, it doesn't change your contractual obligations for the employer. It doesn't build upon the base. It's over here. It's pot, the pot over here. So once they get those dollars, it doesn't change the retirement though. That's what I'm trying to understand. Does it? Unless you got hired at 60 and you're going to retire at 65.
for most members, a retention or a recruitment incentive is not going to be in their final average salary. It'll be salary, could be anyway, and it'll be reported. If they happen to, get hired at 50 and work 5 years and retire,
That's wondering,
it will be in their final average salary. But the key thing on those, getting back to Mitch's original question, is OSA and DRS, they don't break down cellular granularly to that level like you're talking about, like we learned about with overtime at the last meeting. They can tell you what the total salary for that member was reported for that year. How much of that salary was a retention incentive? How much of that was overtime? How much of that was specialty pay? They can't tell you, break down any of those kind of components of salary, just the total.
Right. The problem is that when the incentives were in the $5,000 or $10,000 range, it was probably de minimis in the overall assumptions across an entire class. When they're $50,000 to $75,000 to $100,000 bonuses, we're now talking about a pretty big artificial jump in the assumptions, which would make
Yes.
assumptions fairly inaccurate at doing some kind of forecasting.
So
So
Where you'll
again, I'm not
see,
trying to criticize the assumptions.
no,
I want to make sure that we're capturing the right concepts. To Dennis's point, a lot of times there's several different tranches that get paid. There's an initial upfront that might have been pre-hire, but then there's 1 or 2 or 3 post-hire additions to that to make the entire promised amount come to full realization. Whether that's being captured in year 1 or 2, if somebody's not going back and looking at these agreements, and if each agreement across every employer in the state is different, it's going to create this massive diversity of treatment for what was meant to be kind of a universally applied tool. And it was never cleared through this kind of a process, the vetting for how these bonuses are going to get sort of meted out. It's willy-nilly, employer, and that's So trying to capture how that's going to impact what the future retirement plan costs are going to be for those retirees is incredibly complicated. I get it. I just wanted to make sure that we were starting to have a discussion about these. It's a much bigger tool in the employer arsenal now.
Yes. Two things. We already, because you have bargaining, it's different, every police contract, every fire, so it is very contract or very complicated. But where you do see it and where it is tracked and where you can look for these kind of things in the future is back to that number that Mitch was talking about. Salaries were 2.6%, or there was a 2.6% cost, and 3/4 of that had to do with higher than expected salaries. Obviously, the types of incentives that you're talking about, the fact that they've gone from 10 to 50 to 75 is going to be a component of that salary increase. How much of that is due to the incentives versus overtime versus regular salary growth? That's the piece where we can't answer your question to that level of detail, but it is on a plan level being tracked accurately. You'll be voting on new salary growth assumptions in December. So the impacts of all the things you're talking about are being tracked and are being handled appropriately. They're just not done on a granular basis.
Sure, no, I get all that. And I think part of my frustration is these are not bargained. None of these recruitment and lateral hiring incentives are bargained. These are implemented by management. The retention bonuses might be a bargained piece, but that in the impacts, part of the benefit of the bargaining process is you get into the details of all the collateral impacts. What is the impact of the employer for the contribution rate? What is the cost of the employee for that? How does the plan get made whole for what that may ultimately do to cause impact of the plan? And that's not being bargained. That's just being implemented. And so it may be that we are a unique subset of the state's employees in that regard. But to that extent, this might be a big enough problem as an outlier for making statistical sort of guesses about what those salaries might be, especially as it becomes more and more the norm in order to attract talent into the law enforcement profession, at least, that we've got to offer these kinds of bonuses because they're getting sizable. So just sorry for the diversion into this concept.
From our employer side of the world, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add to this conversation because, we have a lot of these conversations as we bargain contracts and then offer things like hire on bonuses, retention bonuses, whatever they may be. I can't speak for all cities. I can speak for Olympia. Our payroll teams, when contracts are bargained or we make management level decisions around compensation, we have a conversation directly with DRS through our payroll team to figure out how we're going to report to make sure we report it accurately. Now, to Steve's point, we could get it wrong, and then a future audit could sort it out, and then we might have to make a correction. But we work really hard to make sure that we're communicating with DRS and giving them the kind of data they need so that we have good data to inform these decisions as well. My assumption is a lot of cities are doing that through their payroll groups because we all want to get it right, in terms of making sure we get the right data to the right people. So I'll just add that to the conversation.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, don't do that again. Just kidding.
Okay, background of projections is done. We can take a look at our actual projections for funded status that we have. And here is our first projection graph. This is a funded status projection from the 2024 valuation. So using just what we know at the June 30, 2024 valuation date. So this does not include that 2025 investment return. We're gonna show the impact of that on the next slide. On the graph, the setup I have here is funded status is on the vertical axis. We have valuation year on the horizontal axis. On the horizontal axis, I have highlighted just the odd-yeared valuations. These are the board's rate-setting valuations. Then in the middle of the graph, there is a big black line. To the left of the black line are completed valuations. To the right is the projections. You probably figured that out with the big projection flag on there. In terms of what you see looking at the projection for 2025, I have that funded status broken out in a little bit more detail. Everything else is rounded. For 2025, I have that out to an additional decimal point because that is the board's upcoming rate setting valuation. And then what we see from this compared to 2024, as we step into the projection, we see an increase in the funded status. And we see a sequential increase in the funded status starting in 2025 all the way through 2028. And that is a direct cause of those deferred investment gains, that $1 billion. That $1 billion was going to be recognized over 4 years, and correspondingly, we see a 4-year increase in the funded status from 2025 through 2028. We are assuming all future plan experience is going to match the plan assumptions, so there's no offsetting losses that would eat up these deferred gains. So they all flow into increasing funded status. And then from 2029 and beyond, the funded status stays right around that 105% mark. So this is generally a good news projection for the plan. From where we are today, the plan is projected to increase in funded status. There's a little bit more good news when we add in the 2025 investment return of 9.5%. And here is the new projection when we include that return. Now, 9.5% return, that is greater than the assumed return of 7%. So it comes as no surprise. You have higher investment experience. The projected funded status is higher as well. In terms of the actual numbers that we see, 2025 higher by almost a full percentage, and then 2027, 29 up in the 107, 108 area. And this is a really good example comparing the last graph to this graph. 1 year of investment experience changes, say, the 2029 the 2029 funded status from 105 to 108%. So 3 percentage point change in projected funded status with just 1 year of plan experience. This really speaks to how much these projections can change as actual experience emerges and it gets wrapped into the system. And this just gives me a chance to speak to the kind of the spirit of these projections, and that is to not get too tunnel vision on any specific number, but really focusing on the general trends that we see in these graphs. And the general trends that we see is when we're starting with what we know, the 102% from the 2024 valuation, and we go into the projections, we see an increase in funded status. And that's good. If we saw something different, if we're starting at 102 and we saw, say, a decrease to 97 or 98, that might clue us in that there might be something to look at a little bit further. But here we see an increase in the funded status, and we can track exactly why. There is one thing in this projections that I have not included, and that is the impact of any new economic or demographic assumptions. We presented those last month. I didn't have an exact number for you that would decrease or change the funded status by. We had a range. The range was lower. It was a decrease in funded status. That's still where we are today. We still just have that range, but I can add that range onto this graph for you. This is our estimation of where we think funded status would land in this projection if the economic and demographic assumptions that we presented last month were completely adopted, and also if there was no changes that came through the audit that's currently ongoing. So we think it would land somewhere in that green range. Now, could fall outside that green range, but we think it would be somewhere in, I'm always going to hedge my bets. It could fall outside that green range, but we think it's going to land in there. And the spirit of the projections, what do we see with that green range? Still an increase in funded status from 2024. And then when we step out to 27 and 29, funded status is around that 105% mark and looking like it could even exceed up into the 106 and 107s out in 2029, depending on the ultimate impact of those new assumptions. Of course, this is all contingent on actual experience playing through the system. We've seen investment returns can make a big impact. We saw just the impact of just a single year of investment returns. And then the last few valuations, as we saw in that funded status reconciliation table, plan experience can make a pretty sizable impact too. And as plan experience plays through the system in terms of salaries and retirement rates, we could continue to see what we've seen in the past, which that might decrease funded status, or a flip, and it could actually increase funded status compared to the plan assumptions as well. And this is the benefit of doing annual valuations. We keep track of this stuff. We update these projections and present it to you, the board, so that you can have an idea of what's coming down the pike for you. And then we will
Citizen
have,
McElligott.
go for it.
Do you guys do shock tests on this where the returns were 9.5%? Do you do the other way too? They say, okay, the return rate was only 5% and where these numbers would end up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're remembering my presentation last
Yeah.
year where I did, I think 2 or 3 different shock tests to
Yeah.
what the projections, how it would handle certain different series of investment returns in the future. We can punch all of that into these projection models. I didn't do any of that today, and I didn't do it today for one specific reason, because right now we are at the 2024 valuation. Your next rate setting valuation is 2025, and we already know the investment rate of return for that. But
Right.
going forward, now that I know Pat's interested in that, I can definitely include that in future updates to for the projections.
Yeah, what scares me is looking at this as a photo shot. It looks really great. And to some people, they may think that they may be able to adjust those numbers down by not making contributions. And I never want to see us get into a situation where, because the numbers look so great, the argument to say that, look, you got this amount of money, you only need this amount of money, so we should have the ability to dip in and take some of this, or even do that ugly word of contribution holidays, which never works out for anybody at the end.
Yeah, this is where I would repeat some of my earlier comments and
Yeah.
just caution about relying on these projections too much. Actual plan experience will play through the system, and we will see what the actual funded status is when we get there.
Thanks,
The general trend, though, is up, and that's good news for the plan. Thank you, Pat,
Yeah.
for the questions.
And thanks for reiterating that portion too.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Senator.
Mitch, I always have to ask a question, give Lisa the opportunity to roll her eyes. It's another one of those questions from Holly. And I know there's no technical definition for a mature system, that's accurate. But assuming that we're early enough in the game here that we still have a 2-to-1 ratio in retirees, funding, active people versus retirees, will this projection start to change as we level out to hit closer to 1-to-1 and something like that, just from the revenue stream coming in? I know that we have a large part of it return on investment at this point, but you still have substantial, contributions there. Will that change the nature of projections in front of us, say 10 years out, 15 years out?
Yeah, really good question. Will this projection change as the maturity of the plan changes? Most notably, as that ratio of more annuitants versus actives. LEF 2 has been on a maturing trend since its inception, since the late 70s. And what we typically see is when we have a projection like this, where all future plan experience is going to perfectly match the assumptions. No, it's gonna follow exactly what we say it does, because that's how we set it up, because it's all gonna match. In reality, as plan experience starts playing through the system, this is going to change around. And as the plan gets more mature, as more members are on the annuitant side, and the level of salaries, or excuse me, the level of assets relative to the salaries that you can collect contribution rates over, as the salaries are smaller, the plan could be more sensitive to negative plan experience, because as negative investment experience hits a larger amount of assets, there are smaller amounts of salary to pull contributions over. The worst scenarios of plan maturity, where plans are incredibly mature and high contribution rates need to be levied over a smaller and smaller group of people, the worst impacts of that for LEF 2 are somewhat managed by the fact that LEF 2 is an open plan and that new members continue to join the plan. As long as LEF 2 remains open, it will never be like LEF 1, where there are no active members and no salary base to pull over. So yeah, as we step out into the future, some of the shock tests that Pat was talking about, those could show bigger swings in the projected funded status based on maturity, especially as you get further into the future. But I would say that the worst impacts of maturity are probably going to be blunted by the fact that it is an open plan.
Wolf, you got a question?
Yeah, quickly, Would it be right to say that the green stripe you have on this chart just gradually in small increments gets a little wider over time as the plan matures? Because what you're really saying isn't that the assumptions change per se, but that the risk set around those assumptions and the projection itself grows, but only very slowly as the plan matures.
Yeah, so good question. So I would just come back to that this is a deterministic set of projections in that we're going to project
Sure.
everything that matches. When I'm talking about changing the assumptions here, I didn't widen that band because if you're going to make the assumption that all future contribution rates are going to be adopted exactly according to the policy, you would assume that any contribution rate increases that would result from the assumptions would also be collected, and that green band probably wouldn't change very much. But that's a very astute observation, and as it really plays out, yeah, that band could get a little larger.
But over a very long period of time, you're only out to 2032 or 3. You need to be out to 2052 or 2072 to see very much impact on plan maturity.
Yep.
It's going
Exactly.
to change very, very slowly.
Go ahead, Chris.
You guys are making a really compelling case for hiring a lot more firefighters and cops. Thank you.
As long as I get the salary right.
Right. Go ahead.
Okay. So this wraps up the projections I had. So this is the projection update. Like I said, this is an off-cycle valuation, so no contribution rates, but I did want to touch on contribution rates. I wanted to touch on the adopted contribution rates the board has currently adopted. Those are in the table on this slide. The 2025-27 column, that's where the plan is currently. That is what's currently being collected from members, employers, and the state. The board also adopted 2028 and 2029 using your 4-year rate adoption policy, sequential increases in the contribution rates for each of those given years. The board made that decision based on the 2023 rate setting valuation last summer. I bring this up because I want to point out that you will be doing rate setting again next summer with the 2025 valuation, and you can still update and change those 2028 and 2029 rates if you so choose. You don't have to, but it is an option for you. The adopted word sounds very firm and strict, but you can edit those if you want to. And then when we get there for the 2025 valuation, it will include any economic or demographic assumptions that could be adopted by the board this interim. And then summary slide here just to wrap up everything that we talked about today. Plan is considered healthy based on the latest measurement. Funded status still over 100%. Actuarial value of assets deferring over $1 billion. As those deferred assets are recognized, they will either offset negative plan experience or improve funded status. When we looked at the projections, we saw an improved funded status when reflecting both the new assumptions and the 2025 investment gain. And then looking to the future, 2025 actuarial valuation report will be available next summer to help inform your rate setting. And with that, happy to answer any questions or read this disclosure slide.
Read it fast.
No one wants me to do that. Yeah. You don't actually have to read it.
I was making sure you weren't sneaking something in there on me.
It's not letting me go back. It's stuck.
Chris, can you tell us what that means? That's right. Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mitch? All right. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Always good to see you. All right. Number 2 on our list is the board expectations, and Tim's coming forward. So good morning, Tim.
Morning. Good morning, members of the board. For the record, Tim Valencia, Deputy Director for the LEOFF 2 Board. This is the annual report out on board member expectations. You all recently have gone through a major part of this process, and we thank everybody's participation in the expectation process. So this process has been an important part of the customer service that the team provides for the boards for the last 12 years. We implemented this customer service program in 2012. Our viewpoint as the team members is that you are our primary customers. Everything that we're doing is focused on making sure that we're meeting your expectations. And while we do interact with the plan members and annuitants, those really are your primary customers in many respects, although we certainly always strive to provide excellent service to them when they contact us, because that is one of your expectations. So this is an important feedback process. It's common in corporations around the world, where it's a constant feedback loop for us, that we can give you the best service possible if we know what you expect. And if we don't know what you expect, we can't provide that service. So if there's something that you're experiencing that's different than what we're providing you, that gap is considered a problem. So this process is about making sure we don't have any gaps in providing you the information, education, and services that you need to be an effective, efficient trustee. So as you recall from your recent experience, there are 7 expectations that we look at for the board. Now, I would encourage you to think of these as buckets rather than specific expectations. When we started this process, we did a lot of querying of trustees. We've continued to ask trustees about expectations. And when we get individual statements of here's something I need, we're always looking at, does that fit in one of these buckets? Or is this a whole new bucket? So we're always looking at that. And so always keep that in the back of your head. If something new exists, if there's something that you need as a trustee. But when you start to look at these, like responsibly govern the plan, that's part of what you expect of us as the professional staff to help you with responsibly governing the plan, which is your primary function under the statute. Helping you get up to speed as soon as possible. Again, as a bucket, this isn't just about new trustees and getting them up to speed, which is a large part of it, but this is if anything comes up, say, during session, making sure you know immediately that something has popped up. We have a cybersecurity risk, making sure you're aware of that. So it's when you need to know something, it's that speed of transaction. Are we helping you get up to speed on anything as quickly as possible? Keeping you informed, it's part and parcel to that. But again, what's going on? What are the issues? What are the trends? What are the things that you need to know as trustees? Always making sure that you're kept informed on what's happening. Supporting your policy decisions. That's something that when the board discusses it, it's when the board makes a decision. That's the board's discussion. It's not Steve's decision. It's not Tim's decision. It's not Jacob's decision. Making sure that we're supporting the board's decision when we're talking to members, legislators, or anybody else. That's the expectation. And then educating the plan stakeholders. That's a big bucket. There's a lot of different things. So out of that, we have programs like our outreach program is part of going out and educating, whether out doing presentations at your membership meetings, whether I'm going to a local and doing a presentation, but that also stretches down to we're doing newsletters, we're, putting things on the website. We have a lot of different publications that we're working on. So we're doing a lot of different things to try and reach out and educate the plan stakeholders. Even these meetings is part of that. Providing professional administrative support, of course, that's everything that we're doing, everything for, making sure that you have a great meeting experience here, that you have everything you need, making sure you have good experiences going to your professional development, have those opportunities, that your travel experience goes flawlessly. Those are all the things that we're striving for under providing administrative support, including making sure as a state agency, are we managing it under all the expectations of a state organization. So like the financial expenditure audits, things of that nature, making sure that we are working efficiently and effectively. And the last one, again, assist us in responsible decision-making. So, a big part of that is Mitch's work on, his last presentation. That's an important part of helping you make responsible decisions. I know from my work around, at conferences, talking to other peers, you guys have far more educational, sessions from the actuary than any other plan that I've seen so far. And that's part of helping make sure you have making responsible decisions, which is shows in the results that you guys have had with managing this plan effectively, and which ties back to the strategic plans. But for the team's perspective, we're always looking at these expectations, and my line is that anything we're doing, no matter what it is, it should tie to one of these expectations. It should fit into that bucket. And if we're doing something that doesn't fit into that bucket, either it's something we have to look at whether we should be doing it, or whether there's a whole different expectation. So that's from our perspective, but I would encourage you to always be communicating with us. Think about it, possibly, or consider it from that perspective, because we do want to know if there is something new or something that's not being met. And, again, at the bucket, you may have an individual expectation, and we want to know about that. So I'm only going to show you two graphs this year. One, I want to show you first over time. As I said, we've been doing this program since 2012. And as you can see, the general trend line here has been positive. And over the last 7 years, we've actually been very, very stable at an extremely high level of service. As you'll recall from your the surveys that we asked you to do, the levels are from 1 to 5. It's a five rating scale, which is all either you're not at all satisfied or you're completely satisfied. Thinking of it from a more statistical standpoint, if you're right in the middle at 3, which is the center point, that just means we're meeting expectations. We're doing everything you expect us to do. If we're above 3, that means we're exceeding those expectations. Of course, 5 means, extremely or completely satisfied. And below 3 means, well, there's something that's not being met. As you can see, we've been, above 4.8 for the last 7 years. And so that means that suggests that we're operating at a very good level of meeting trustees' expectations. It is a small sample size with only 11 trustees this year with 2 new trustees, though they don't have numbers included this year until they have a full year. So when you're talking about nine people, it can be very, very sensitive. And that's okay, because even year to year, even though it's the same measure, you may not remember what you scored last year. And that's okay, because this is always a 1-year measure. I want to know, how did we do in the last year? So I always want your score of how did I feel this year? Because no matter what you did the year before, it doesn't matter, because, other than, maybe there was a change if it was negative, we need to know about that. And that's why when we send you the survey, it's important to fill those out. Those are the precursor to the expectation interview, because when we see something, when we're looking year to year on those expectation interviews, it gives Steve and Jacob an opportunity to look at that and ask questions. If something changed, and maybe just go, I don't remember what I did last year, and maybe last year I was 5 and this year I was 4.9. But we still want to make sure we're probing to find out, was there a change? Or if there's a big change, we want to know. So those kinds of, the feedback we get on those surveys is important, and it leads to a better discussion at the expectation interview itself. So I share that just to give you more flavor for what that process is about and how to maximize the effectiveness of that process. The feedback that we get there, I know Steve has found that incredibly valuable over the years, and I know for the team, we look at that, very seriously, looking for what are the things that we can do better. So let's look at that on an individualized basis. So for this year's, looking at the 7 expectations, again, all of the numbers are extremely high. That's how these are valued. And so we appreciate that feedback. And it means that right now we are meeting your expectations at an extremely high level. As again, the numbers are very sensitive, because one person scoring something a 10th lower than they did the year before can affect the number. So I'm not worried about little changes here and there. There were 3 that went from 5 to 4.9, but that's still an exceedingly high level of meeting expectations. So I'm glad to see that trend hasn't changed at all. Everything's still very good. But I will encourage you, as you go through this next year, because that cycle is always going to be centered on the summertime. You'll get the survey in midsummer, the expectation interview at the end of summer. So be thinking right now, you're already in the cycle for the next year. Are we meeting your expectations? So you can answer that question come next summer, because that's what we're looking at. And I want to know is if there's something we're not meeting, that's an important part. So the last thing, this is the point where if you have any questions, or if you guys want to discuss anything in particular, I will say, I think all the comments were incredibly positive. We appreciate the written feedback as well, explaining your scores. That is useful information, so we do appreciate that. But this is a constant feedback loop. It doesn't ever have to be now, it doesn't have to be this year. At any point, if you have something to share with the team, please share it with the team. So if you have individually a new expectation or something that you think the board should be looking at. If there's a change to this process that we're finding, now that we're transitioning from Steve as the director to Jacob as the director, that may be a conversation that you have with Jacob of, how do we change this process? I know this year we integrated some virtual meetings rather than in person. So that's one of the expectations that you can consider, is that if there's somehow to make that process better for you to give that feedback, we need to know about those things. But for us, clarity about what you expect is the key to our success. That's the number one line. So if we don't know about it, we can't do it, or we can't fix it, or we can't solve it. So we appreciate your feedback. So if I would certainly open up to any questions, or if you have discussions that you would like to share with each other in this process, I'll leave that to you.
Jay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All I want to share is gratitude. Gratitude for the amazing staff that serve this board. Highly professional. All of my needs are met. My questions get answered promptly. I think all of us have a similar experience. So I just want to share gratitude. The scores reflect the amazing work that you all do to support us. So just thank you.
Thank you.
Senator?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to second Jay's thoughts also, but beyond that, thank God you finally have got a little bit of a softer approach to something like this, because I've seen you drop a basis point in one category over the last 5-10 years here, and all the hand wringing and angst and everything. Oh my God, I'm down 2 basis points. What the hell do we do wrong? This kind of thing. And it's just, you're right. Half the time I can't remember what we had for dinner last night, much less what we put down last year and something like this. So it's just, thank God everybody's relaxed a little bit about this.
Tim's mellowing.
I had a question. Did anything stand out? I mean, in the comments, anything just kind of catch your eye and say, hey, that's good, that's interesting?
I was going to talk about the comments in 2 areas, but also express my gratitude to all of you. Filling out the surveys, setting up the time for the interviews is time out of, you guys have got busy jobs, you've got important jobs, and taking the time. Tim and I did a presentation about this process at the IFEBP years ago to help other plan administrators that support boards, hopefully support them better. I can tell you that one of the primary bits of feedback that we got from other plan administrators was they were terrified to ask their board members what their expectations were. Honest to God. And there is, some of these conversations can be challenging, but if we know your expectations, so we have a much better chance of meeting them. And if we know them and we meet them, then there really shouldn't be too much about those conversations to be terrified. So you saw the scores the first year. There were some conversations that took place when we started this process where I might have thought we were doing better than we were. And learning that and then adjusting to that is the thing. So I appreciate the time that you guys put into this. Comments in particular, every year we try to add in one specific area that we are looking for additional feedback on, at least one. For the last couple of years, it's been the succession planning. What were you looking for specifically out of that process? What did you want to see from Jacob? What did you want to see from Steve? Did you see what you were hoping to see? And so we had that conversation with all of you this year. And what is left that you want, and Jacob and I'll be talking about that here later this meeting, what is left in that succession process, at what expectations you have remaining. The other piece that we talked about, and this gets back to Mitch's, it wasn't on the survey, but we made a very conscious effort to talk with all of you about next year's rate setting process. The kind of give you a preview, because we're probably going to have to give legislators and legislative staff, as they develop the budget, a preview of what's going to be in front of you for your rate setting. The last time you set rates, it looked it was better than 50-50. Let's just say it was projected that your funded ratio was going to dip below 200 or 105. So your rates were going to have to go up, and you adopted a phase-in of those rate increases. The first question we got during session is, do we really need to put those rate increases in the budget? And I was like, yeah, put them in the budget because there's a fair chance that you'll need them. Since then, we've been watching the investment returns, the Val results, especially the experience piece of it with the higher than expected salary costs, the economic assumptions, the new demographic assumptions. All of that will roll together and you'll have options next year that are probably, well, they'll be different than the options that you've faced in the past. So we've been trying to, prepare you as we're preparing others this year in those expectation interviews, get a feel for what you are looking for other than from the actuaries. You're getting great actuarial support, by the way. I'll talk about that in my presentation, but what do you need going into the rate setting to help properly as trustees evaluate the options that you're going to have next year? It will actually be I won't be here to experience it, but it will be a very fun rate setting experience from that perspective. So that was the two things. What do you have left on succession planning and a discussion about the potential rate setting environment that you'll be in next interim. Those were the two themes that dominated all those were the kind of the common themes in the expectation conversations this year.
I know you're excited about the rate setting for next year because you won't be sitting here. But I hope you're not going to be one of those people who just come to every meeting and sit in the back and tell us, okay, we're doing something wrong.
No, I'll talk about that in my presentation as well. But,
I love you. All right. Tim, was that it? Was there another one?
That concludes all my remarks.
Yeah. Making sure I didn't forget you. I know that it's coming up a little bit. We had a networking break, which I think was going to be for the lunch period coming in. So I think we're going to move to the what do we got? Comparison of left plan 2 to other national plans. And we'll do that one and then see where we land for time wise. Okay. Okay. We'll see where we are. So this, Mr. Nelson.
all right.
Are you
So-
going to here? Or are you going to go up there?
Yeah, Tim and I we were talking about this. I'm going to try doing the presentation from here. He's actually going to be running it from his computer. And with us being able to see each other, we figure that'll work better, even though it means the screen for the presenter is empty. But that's our plan. Now, by way of background, I want to share two things with you. One, over the years, as I've gone to conferences and I've talked about, as I represent you guys, I'm the director of Left Plan 2. You guys get a lot of positive national attention. And so when people ask me, hey, who are you? They haven't met me. One of my favorite things to do, I've done it a number of years, and some of you have been at conferences to see this, is I'll introduce myself as the director of the most successful public pension plan in the country. And I love it because it usually will start a discussion about what that means. So Tim and I were at NC PERS last year. Daryl was at this presentation with us, and there was a actuarial firm that was comparing plans around the country. They have this software that allows you to go in, if you go onto their system, and you can pull up your plan. And so Tim and I are literally sitting next to each other going, where are we? Where are we? As they were going through this series of slides, trying to figure out where we compared to other plans in the country. And not surprisingly, it was very favorable. And at that at that, while we were doing this, we were like, this would be a great presentation for the board. So we worked with I had lunch right after that with the actuaries from that firm. And I told them, yeah, I want to call the presentation, is LEF 2 the most successful public pension plan in the country? Because I've been saying it for years. Let's, you guys come up with the data and you tell me whether I'm been lying or not. And it was fun. There really isn't a measure that says you're the best. Okay, so there's a bunch of measures that go into evaluating how you compare. At the most recent NASRA conference, I was having breakfast with my brother, who's the director of the Alameda County plan down in California. And one of the people at the table asked me who I was. And I was like, I'm the director of the most successful public pension plan in the country. And my brother and I started in with this great debate. How do you measure that? Well, pick one, pick a measure. And we started talking about a lot of the things that you're going to see in this slide. There was actually somebody at the table who said, I want you to come to this conference that I'm doing in the future, the two of you, and have that exact same breakfast conversation again. But the idea is, how do you measure success of a plan? I'll be talking about that, and I'll also be talking about some of the challenges that you face in the future, including some of the maturity stuff that you ask questions about, Senator. So hopefully this will be enjoyable, but I want to share that background with you. With that, Tim, let's go ahead and get going. So one of the most common measures of a plan's success that you'll hear used is the funded status. That's a bit misleading because it's a snapshot in time. The funded status this year, different next year. But this is a chart that shows your funded status over time. In order to compare it with other plans, it's not on a smoothed actuarial basis, it's on a market value basis. The actuarial firm that prepared these slides for us is Chiron. It comes out of their database, which is the same database, that's what NASRA, the National Association of State Retirement Administrators, uses. So this animation, Tim, if you can hit play, this shows your funded status over time. Going back to the beginning of the board, you're that dark blue dot. It shows your funded status over time compared to all the other public pension plans in the NASRA database going up till today. And as you can see, that blue dot is consistently among the very best funded plans in the country. Since the board was created, your funded status has remained. So you can just, on an annual basis, using your funded ratio as a measure of your plan's success can be misleading. But if you look at it over a 20-year time span, you will see that you have maintained funding excellence. One of your strategic goals on the board is make sure that the plan is adequately funded. And you have, by any reasonable measurement, you've hit that one out of the park over the last 20 years. Tim mentioned it. When we talk to our peers, what makes LEF 2 different? One of the things we talk about is the actuarial support that you get. I've said this before, you get more presentations at this board from the state actuary than the Pension Funding Council, the House Appropriations Committee, the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and the Select Committee on Pension Policy, all combined. And I think that attention to the actuarial principles of the plan and that expert advice that you get has allowed you guys to managed this plan so successfully. So the next slide talks about the funded ratio. One of the, I mentioned the fact that it was done on a market value to get out, take care of all the smoothing. This shows your funded ratio where they used the same 7% assumption for all the plans. So if you normalize, some plans are a little bit more aggressive, some plans are a little bit more conservative. But if you normalized the plans for a 7% funded ratio and you looked at it over time, you're the dark blue, bar and the national average. And this is all plans, not just public safety plans. I'll talk more about that later. But you'll see that you have consistently been even normalizing for investment returns. In other words, you're not making your funded ratio look better by coming up with an overly optimistic investment return assumption. Okay, the next slide. One of the keys to your success is not in your control, and that is how well your investments perform. All the assets in LEOFF Plan 2 are invested by the State Investment Board. They let you know on an annual basis. They come and tell you what they're doing and how they did in the last year. This is a year by year, going back to the beginning of the board as well, of where investment returns have been. And then you will see on a year by year basis, consistently, the State Investment Board has performed well. Their performance is that gold dot that's for LEOFF 2. That's that gold dot. The one chart or the one piece I want to point out here is on the very far right. It's kind of hidden because it gets, that's the cumulative. So if you look at their investment returns over this entire period of time, you will see that gold dot is at the very top of investment returns for all the public funds around the country. So the State Investment Board has been an extraordinarily helpful partner. It makes your job a lot easier when you're getting investment returns of 7.95 or 9.55, like you were talking about, and you were assuming 7, as opposed to some plans around the country who might be assuming 7.5 and they're getting returns of 6.4, and they're trying to figure out how to manage the reverse side of the problem that you guys have. So kudos to the SIB. Normalizing this again, here you see how your earnings assumption, your discount rate is what the actuaries call it, is 7%. How that has changed over time for all the plans around the country and for you. And you'll see that, going back to 2001, the average in earning, investment return assumption around the country was around 8, and you were at 8. That has become more conservative over time, and to the point where now you are at 7. That's also now maybe more on the, well, again, that's right on the national average. So you've done a good job of adjusting. You can see the changes you've made over time. All of those adjustments were recommended by the state actuary, adopted by you. This shows that when you look at one takeaway that from this, if you look at your funded status, say in 2000 and let's just say 2004, it might have been right around 105. And now you look at your funded status today and it's right around 105, between 100 and 105. But when you consider not only has your investment return assumption become more conservative, you've adopted more conservative life expectancy assumptions, you've adopted different long-term economic assumptions. The plan's assumptions are more are stronger now. In a sense, they're less optimistic, if you will, than they were 20 years ago, but you have maintained that same level of funding excellence. That's something that's easy to overlook if you just look at the funded status over time and say, oh, it's been 105, 105, 105, great. It's actually really great because you have done that while de-risking the plan in an actuarial sense. All right, the next slide. This talks about the rate stability goal of the board. And if you look at the gold dot, now they didn't use the actual rates adopted by the board for this slide. Again, they pull all their data from the NASRA database. So to pull out the contribution rates, what they did is divide the plan membership by the total contributions of the plan and just approximate it, and that should be pretty close. The key takeaway from this is in 2008 is when the board adopted and fully implemented your existing funding policy. If you will look at that gold dot from 2008 to the present in 2024, you will see how remarkably level your rates have been. So again, your strategic goal of maintaining stable rates, you have knocked it out of the park. Another piece that might be hidden in this data is all the different events that have taken place since 2008. So during this period of rate stability, you managed rates through the Great Recession. You managed rates through the longest extended market run-up in history. You have managed rates through multiple changes to the underlying actuarial assumptions to make the plan more conservative. You have adopted a significant benefit improvement, and rates have remained stable throughout that time. That would not have happened except because you guys actually manage rates. It's not just a mathematical process. You have implemented a level of fiduciary judgment into the process where you are balancing the funded status, the strategic goal of fully funding the plan with the strategic goal of rate stability. And you're doing it not as a mathematical exercise, but as a fiduciary exercise. That distinguishes you from all the other plans in the state of Washington. You're the only plan that does it that way. And the success, there were a lot of people, I can tell you this, when I took this job back in 2003 or whenever it was, who were absolutely 100% convinced that you would fail. 100%. And now that you have a 20+ year track record to look back on, I think it is fair to say not only that you have not failed, but you have succeeded extraordinarily well. So you might have had some help. Like I said, it's easier to manage rate stability when you're getting good investment returns, et cetera, but that stability is due to your work. So kudos to you. Next slide. This talks about the normal cost rate. This is like, what does the plan cost? So one of the we'll talk about this a little bit, but like when I was having, breakfast with my brother, one of the things he was like, well, yeah, but left two, how can you say you're the best, most successful plan in the country? You've got the modest benefits. So it's like, well, here is using the normal cost as a way of measuring what the benefits are of the plan. Here are the benefits provided in left two compared to other public plans around the country. And as you can see, left two is above average. Again, this includes all plans, so not just public safety. Among public safety plans, you would probably be closer to the midpoint than you see on this. But one of the things, and this kind of gets to the next slide that I talked about, is, well, no, this kind of gets back, I'll get to this, salary. What I told my brother is like, yeah, the benefits are modest, but the salaries are really good. And if you're going to have, how can you say if a guy works 20 years for this one city and he retires with a pension that's paying him $50,000 a year, and he works 20 years for left two and he retires with a pension that's paying him $50,000 a year, how do you say which plan is better? That measurement of the actual pension benefits includes salary. And we'll see a little bit later where Washington salaries come along. But what this chart is showing is the combination of your great investment policy and success with your strong funding policy, and how those two things have combined to really put left two in a positive light. So for contributions to be sufficient, you want them to be able to pay at least the benefits at their own. And that's part of the aggregate funding method, which was in place. It's part of that piece of making sure that the normal cost of your plan every year. If we hit all of our assumptions, what's the normal cost? You guys have used that number as sort of the benchmark for your funding policy. So if you look at this over time, are you at least paying the normal cost? Here's where the gold dot is again what left two has paid over time compared to how the normal cost. And what you see is you've remained steady in your funding regardless of what's been going on. One of the challenges of any funded method, if you make it just a purely mathematical exercise, is then if you achieve your strategic goals, it's just a matter of luck. So one of the questions that I was asked very early on in the at the left board, Steve, why do rates go up when things are going bad and go down when things are going good? Isn't there a way that we could actually pay a little bit more when things are going good so that we don't have to pay more when things are going bad and keep rates level? And it's like, you know what, that's actually a really good question. Let me talk to the actuaries and see. It seems like there should be a way. And over time, culminating with the board's funding policy that you guys implemented in 2008, that is what came up with. So, you have inserted a level of fiduciary judgment into the rate setting process, and the results of that, you kept the rates higher when you had good times and you could have lowered them. You've kept the rates maybe a little bit lower than you would have been, when you had bad times. And all of that over time has left you where you're at now, which is in a very sound actuarial spot. This next slide is the one I was talking about a little bit earlier, and it gets into salaries. So if you look at the total benefits paid out of when somebody retires from left two, you'll see left two compares favorably to any other plan around the country, including a lot of municipal plans. Ryan Frost, when he was at the office, did a great survey, went out, used the NASRA database, took all the benefit provisions of plans, worked in the salary, came up with approximations of, and again, you left two at that point in time was one of the top 10 plans in the country in terms of what you could expect when you retired. This is why, if you've got, especially compared to other public safety plans, average benefits, you're getting more bang for your buck than salaries. Now, when I was talking about this with my brother at breakfast, one of the things I pointed out is this is actually really a good way to manage that. When you change your benefits, say you're facing a recruiting shortage, you change your plan benefits to help out. Well, that's a permanent change. And you may not be facing a recruiting shortage permanently. So you'll see that a lot of plans around the country, they'll adopt a retention plan, like a drop plan, to keep retirees around longer because they're trying to incentivize keep. And then 5 years later, they don't need to keep those people around anymore. But guess what? That benefit's now permanent and it's part of the plan. And they're paying a lot of money for a benefit that's underutilized. Salaries is a way to, at least economically, salaries is a way to manage those temporary recruiting, retention challenges in a way that is not permanent, at least in theory. One of the challenges that you guys will face going forward, because of what economists are telling us, everybody expected salaries to go up during the COVID epidemic. They did. But what the term that economists are using now is that salary growth has proven to be stickier than expected. So they expected salaries to grow, but then that would either level off or potentially even decrease. And that has not been the case. And so that will be one of the challenges that you face going forward, is continuing. The actuaries have now reported on it 3 years in a row. We asked them specifically to call it out again this year in their presentations to you, the higher than expected salary growth. And there's a number of different reasons for that. How permanent any of those are is hard to say, but that will be something that I suggest you do need to keep you'll be changing your assumptions, or if you adopt the actuary's recommendations in December, but that is probably one of the key long-term economic assumptions now that you're going to need to pay attention to, that you have control over, is your assumptions regarding salary growth. The next part of the presentation gets into maturity. So I was listening intently when you asked that question earlier, Senator, and I think some of this data might be helpful. I'm going to show you a little bit about how the plan has matured over time and what does that mean, because I want to not only give you appropriate kudos and appropriate recognition for the successes that you've had over the 20 years, but part of this presentation is also, just like the salary growth one, giving you a couple of key things to watch for in the future. When a plan is really immature or young, like Left 2 was back in '77, it was first created, you might think that by 2002, the plan's 25 years old. Hey, it's getting mature. No, 25 years in pension plan terms for a new plan is a baby. And because of the youth, you had very few retirees, even as late as 2010. We'll look at this in a little bit more data, but you'll see how few retirees you had compared to active members. And if you look at this chart here, this shows the actives, the support ratio is how you know, how many retirees and beneficiaries do you have compared to actives? Look at the support ratio in 2008 and 2009. So that is when you went through the Great Recession. So earlier, when I was telling you about how you got through the Great Recession and you kept your rate stable and you kept the plan funded, this was one of the things that helped you through that time period, is you had the effect on benefits. So of inflation, minimal. Might have an effect on salaries, which might drive up contributions, but it doesn't create the same kind of risk that a sudden cost might create when you have more retirees per active members. Then you have the greater risk that the contributions for those active members is going to go up. So now you can see where you're at here. You kind of started crossing that line in terms of average. And again, this is all plans, not public safety. Your support ratio, it might look, you know, you're getting off the chart towards the end of that. But again, going back to the points that Mitch made, that your support ratio, and if you can show the next slide, I think it does a better job of drawing this out. When you take into this kind of that percentage, you're an open plan. So yeah, you've got a lot more retirees now than you've ever had. You're still an open plan. If you look at where you're at with the gold dot, even in 2024, you're in good shape. Okay, so getting back to what Wolf and Mitch were talking about, the risk of might not really be overwhelming, or it'll be more challenging for you in 2050 than it is in 2025. No doubt about it. That won't be your problem. Maybe some of you, but it won't be that.
What are you inferring, Counselor?
I don't know. I won't be my problem. I can guarantee you that. But that's the key thing, is this support ratio now is a measurement that actuaries track. They report it every year, even if it's not in the VAL itself. They have a website where they have a bunch of different measures, and they've been tracking this measurement for years. And in the future, it will potentially become more significant, especially if you experience another shock like Pat was talking about, or Senator Holy's talked about, and Mitch was presenting on last year. The ability to recover from that shock without raising your contribution rates will be much more challenging in the future than it was in 2008 and 2009. That being said, if you look at rates around the country or in funded ratios around the country, I am very comfortable in saying you guys managed the Great Recession better than any public pension plan in the country. So the next slide talks about another measure that the actuary tracks now, and this is the market value of assets compared to your payroll. So the bigger your pension fund is, the more sensitive the total is to investment returns. And that number then, if you had a shock to the system, how would that impact your payroll costs? That's where you see the potential for the rate impacts. And you can see here, the actuary put this together, just used a couple of different hypothetical plans to demonstrate how that would work. On the next slide, you can see how that has played out. Oh, and this slide, it includes all plans, but this is only open plans around the country. So it does include other non-public safety plans, but it doesn't include closed plans. You can see where you guys are at in terms of that risk measure. And again, you're in a healthy place. It's over time, your asset leverage, your line remains steady, but the plan is maturing. And so that's why you're kind of moving up in comparison to some of those other peers. But you're in a very, you're in a very healthy place by this measure. Again, this is another measure that the actuary's office prepares, and it's something that you can pay attention to over time. We don't track other plans. The state actuary is for the state of Washington. So they do an amazing job of supporting you and providing the data for you. If you want to compare the plan to other plans around the country, then you need to go to an outside actuary. In this case, it was Chiron. And so I want to thank them for their support in kind of putting together this information for you. Hopefully it's been helpful in terms of seeing some of your successes and some of your remaining challenges. These conclusions came from the Chiron actuary. They weren't mine, but I left them on there, and I think they're good. Left Plan 2's been managed well. Yeah, I might have said exceptionally well. I might have said you've been managed better than any public pension plan in the country. I might have taken it a step further than he did. But again, now, if in the future, when I tell people that I used to be the executive director of the most successful public pension plan in the country, and they say, how do you know that? I've got a whole presentation that I can share with them about your successes over the past 20 years. And again, some of the special sauce has been great work by the State Investment Board, great work by the Actuary's Office. One of the things that you guys do that might go kind of unrecognized by anybody who's not an actuary, but I guarantee it gets noticed by the actuaries, is there's always pressure, the budget versus what's best for the plan. And one of the things that has happened in other plans, even in the state of Washington, is there'll be a pressure, and you saw this back in the early 2000s. We want to reduce the contributions to the plan, so we will adopt actuarial assumptions that did not come from the actuary. Didn't even come from our own actuary. We will substitute our judgment for the actuary's judgment, and we will adopt our own assumptions to get to the rate that we want. One of the things that you guys have done, and I've talked about this a couple of times, you use your own professional judgment as fiduciaries on the rates, but you have always adopted the assumptions recommended by the state actuary. In other words, you're using the right data to inform your decisions or the right assumptions to inform your decisions. You just add your judgment onto there of, they'll calculate for you the mathematical rate using those assumptions, and then you balance that calculation against your judgment with respect to rate stability and full funding of the plan. And that has been an extraordinarily successful combination. You compare your rate stability, your funded status to any other plan in the country, any other plan in the state of Washington, and you can compare very favorably. So when I say you are the most successful public pension plan in the country, I don't think there's any other plan out there that could come up with a presentation, a full rounded presentation like the one you just saw for your plan that is that tells a better story than yours. So kudos to all of you. And again, got a couple of things. If you want to go in and play with those, there's a link at the end of the thing. Play with some of those tools. Like I said, you can go and look at all these different slides. Where do we match? You know, where does PERS 2 match? I was like, well, I might, are you going to get questions about any of the other plans, Steve? And it's like, maybe. Sometimes the employers are interested in PERS 2, not because of how it deals with LEOFF 2, but because they've got a lot of PERS 2 employers at their where they come from as well. But if you wanted to go in and look at some of that stuff, the link is out there. And again, I told Chiron I would give them credit for putting this together, and they were very helpful in walking me through it because I told them I'm not an actuary. So you have got to make this information understandable for me so that I can share it because I'm not an actuary. And to that extent, and in the spirit of all of Mitch's disclaimers earlier, to the extent that I've said anything that turns out to be actuarially imprecise, that falls on me and not the person who put together the presentation. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair, members of the board.
I did have a comment, Tim, on your slide, page 31, where it talked about the conclusions you had, the third section. It says, as LEOFF Plan 2 matures, the challenges will increase. And I think that's important because all the things that you said positively about our board and our work is going to require us to maintain a strong commitment of what we're doing. We're going to have to stay focused as a group. We're going to have to continue our education. And then we're really going to have to rely on the experts, the professionals that we've worked with for years, whether it's State Investment Board, State Actuary, DRS, our own team, for us to keep this thing moving. Because, when things go good, it's nice, right? But when things become difficult, then we're going to have to figure out how to manage that. And I think that's going to be our strength. The board, as it's compromised right now, we're having a strong representation of different groups, different stakeholders, I think allows us to be, very, very, secure. I guess I'm secure in the movement, the direction that we want to go. So it is a challenge. I think we need to know that.
I appreciate that because one of the things that you'll hear me caution, it's not an actuarial caution like plan maturity, but in terms of the success of the board, one of the biggest risks that I think that you face is complacency. And I'm not talking necessarily about board members, but I'm talking about plan members, your strategic partners. Just like Pat was saying, oh, you guys have been doing a great job for 20 years. Here's my idea about how you can maybe do it even just a little bit better. You'll have challenges of people who want to tinker with what you're doing for whatever goal, budgetary or otherwise. These things do come and go. There was not a lot of pressure on the board's rate adoptions for a while there, but I can tell you all the way up until at least 2012, the first 10 years that I was here, that was the number one issue every session, was going in there and trying to explain your funding policy to legislative budget writers and their staff in a way that they were willing to fund the rates adopted by the board as opposed to the rates that they felt were appropriate for the plan based on some other policy, whether it's the plan, here's the policy we use for PERS 2, and it's working for PERS too, so let's apply it to you. Those kind of challenges you will face again. It's just a matter of time. And it may be, that time may be 2 months from now. Usually it's when the budgets are tight, that the challenges on your funding policy have been the greatest in the past. That being said, kudos to the legislature last year when they did pass legislation that changed the actuarial assumptions for many of the state plans. The one plan that they did not change was yours. And I can tell you for certain, the reason they did it is because of the job that you guys have done. That is some cautious optimism for the future, that there may be, even without a presentation like the one you just got, that there's recognition by a lot of them that you guys have been doing an extraordinary job, and they're going to let you continue to do that. That being said, I wouldn't be complacent, and those years where you're going in and you're talking to legislators before session about what the most important issues are out there for your individual stakeholder groups, whether it's fire or law enforcement or employers. One of those goals has always been full funding and for LEOFF 2, and I think you should not get complacent about putting that goal in front of them again in the future.
Great. Wolf, I know you had a comment.
Yeah, just quickly, thank you, Steve, for putting this together. It's really helpful and useful, especially as a reminder as to how important it is to commit to good practices, well-informed and properly supported data and analytics over time, and stay committed to that over time. It's especially true, I think, in the state of Washington, where we have extraordinarily capable investment guidance, direction from State Investment Board and a product there, DRS, LEOFF board ourselves, whether it's our plans or not, we're still a multi-employer, multi-plan state, so it's an extraordinarily complicated space to work in. What we noticed in one of my past jobs in the Treasurer's office was that there wasn't any single voice who was trying to speak to all of those parts. We're a little bit of a special case in that we do actually synthesize all of those inputs and parts, where the rest of the system, there's a pension funding council with its jurisdiction, there's a actuary with its jurisdiction, SIB, OFM, legislature, everybody, and they each have a wedge of the picture and speak knowledgeably and well to the wedge, but are reticent about speaking to any other parts of the wedge. So, yeah, we've got a great opportunity here as a model to keep to the kinds of things that we've done. And what you've set in front of us is a good reminder that there's benefit to that. There's a payoff to that.
All right, thank you, Wolf. Any other comments or questions for Steve? All right, thanks, Steve, for that. I'll turn it back to the group. It's 11:20. Lunch is here. It's ready to go. Would you like to let's take our 15, 20 minutes or so, grab a lunch, and we'll come back and we'll finish up. I know that you have succession planning, the proposed calendar. Thank you for not laminating it. Never again. So we got a few things left to go, but I think they'll move along pretty quickly. So,
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and take a little break. Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and reconvene our meeting. Next up on our agenda is the succession planning status, and that's done by Steve and Jacob. So I'll turn it over to you two. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, Jacob White, staff to the board. As you can tell, Steve's gonna let me be front and center and hog the camera for this presentation, but he'll jump in as needed. Yeah, I agree with the word succession. I was just telling Seth that growing up with a lisp and going to speech therapy all elementary school, there's maybe not a worse word to have to say publicly. So
Just for the record, I don't have a lisp.
well, yeah, and hopefully I don't anymore either. But yeah. Okay. So I'm going to keep this high level and then drill down into these different areas. First, just wanted to start off, I was going to start off first thanking Steve. And then he really, set the bar low for me with all the prior presentations today of what I'm inheriting as the next director. But no, I just want to, take a chance to thank Steve for his support. I know he's talked a lot about over the last year or so, giving me opportunity, but the truth is him and me have been talking about this since I first came to the board, and took me a little bit to work up the courage to tell him that I was, long-term interested in having an opportunity to possibly be the next director. And he's just given me a lot of opportunities and coaching throughout the last 8 years or so. And then it was fun to hear the stories of him and Dave arguing, because that was really my initial introduction to Steve, was sitting between him and Dave at legislative meetings while they talked and argued, and then coming back to work, and everyone wanted to hear stories about what it was like sitting between the two of them. But I didn't have to break up any fights, so they were good brothers, got along well enough. Also just want to thank the board. It was super helpful to get to join Steve with the meetings on the expectation interviews. I get to talk to all of you in this environment, a much more formal environment, and so it was great to get to talk with you more, two-on-one, and get to learn more about you, learn more about what brought you to the board, why you have chosen, many of you, to volunteer years and years of service, and what has drawn you to this. And then also just want to thank the rest of the team at the Left 2 board. After the announcement, just a lot of encouragement and positivity from all my coworkers who know me, have got to work with me for about 10 years now, most of them. So that just means a lot moving forward. The plan for the rest of the year. So Steve has been, we've been using the metaphor of handing off the baton, although it feels like a very awkward handoff where we are hanging on to that baton for 6 months, running with each other. But hopefully it doesn't come, it hasn't been awkward in practice. It's been super helpful for me to continue to have Steve here for this period of time once it's become official. That'll be the next director, to be able to continue to bounce things off him, talk to him about ideas, and continue to get that support and feedback while I can, before he is wearing his Hawaiian shirt and not so easy to get a hold of. He's been giving me the opportunity to take more of the lead internally with the board team. So that's included, really started a few months ago with, or at least, part of it really started a few months ago with our leadership team meetings. So Steve and Tim and Karen had been having leadership team meetings to discuss internal, bigger picture decisions for the agency. And so Steve brought me into those, and then let me be, myself, which is pretty quiet for a while. And then, started over the last few months to start to be more of a decision maker in those meetings. And so those are going to continue until, through this transition period. And then there's some other internal processes, meetings, steps that we're going to continue to hand off more. And a lot of these, the handoff has already started in recent years, but it's going to become more official. Those include board meeting debriefs that we have as a team after the day after the board meetings. Steve's going to have me lead those through the rest of the year. evaluation. So we're coming up on the team evaluation. So Steve is going to do the evaluations for this year. But then we also in that process set the expectations for the upcoming year. So Steve's going to have me take the lead on that, meet with all the left two team members to identify what their goals are for the upcoming year, and yeah, begin that process. Also, we're going to plan on, if the board is okay with it, the plan is for me to go back up. You got one preview of it earlier this year of me getting to set up next to Dennis and Steve's spot. And so plan is for me to do that for the remaining 2 board meetings. Unless there's any concerns from the board, if Dennis is going to want Steve up there next to him still.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine with the shift. Yeah. Been waiting for a while.
He's promised he's still going to be in the room, but he won't have a microphone quite so close. That's and so, and then during legislative session, that's going to continue with me leading those board meetings. And then key partner communications. So this has been something that's been a slow handoff has been going on in over the last year or so. But it'll be more official that Steve's going to have me be the point of contact, the key point of contact with our partner agencies. Mostly that's Department of Retirement Systems, the state actuaries. I don't work as closely with this as often with the State Investment Board, but if anything comes up in this time period with them. And then also, I still have worked since I've been with the board with House, Senate, OFM policy staff, but that's going to become, I'll become the primary point of contact as much as possible with this remaining session. And then, yeah, so that's most of the plan for the internal transition over the rest of the year. The plan for session is going to be, Steve's going to hand off to me handling the board endorsed legislation. So over pretty much since I got hired, I've been testifying at the legislature, assisting with, meeting with legislators, following the bill through the process, drafting amendments, talking to policy staff, but going to make me the primary contact on ushering that bill through, if there's a bill, through the legislative process this session. But Steve's still going to be around, especially if there are any issues such as a merger or termination of LEF 1 that involves LEF 2 at all, or anything around planned governance, which such as the rate setting of the board. So any questions, I guess, before I move on to the last one about plan for session or internal plan for the rest of the year? Like, okay. And then post April, after Steve has retired, this is will be kind of one of the first big decision that I make as the director. I'm really excited to be able to make this decision. Very thankful for Steve that he's handed it off to me. Something he's talked to me about for years of how he does it, which is hiring my current position. So the plan for that will be that I am able to have someone start immediately April 1st. That I think will be a great time for someone to start in this position because we'll be coming out of the legislative session and they'll be able to ease into it a bit before just being slammed with however many policy presentations they'll be working on. It is, put Steve on the spot here. Steve always talks about there being 30 things he looks for in someone, and I'm afraid to ask him. I know he'll come up with 30 if you ask him to name them. So I don't quite have 30, but I do. There are some clear things I'm looking for, and having done the position, this is definitely one I feel the most confident in knowing what I'm looking for. And it's quite the opportunity at the Left 2 board because we are such a small team. And when you introduce a new person to that team, it can have a larger impact than most state agencies that I've worked at least. So looking forward to that. The plan would be to be able to make a formal offer to someone about a month before April 1st, just to give plenty of time for that process. But I've already been talking to people, had people reach out with interest, talked to people who weren't interested, so I've been thinking about that a lot for a while now, and working on it. But in that kind of extended period where you can't really make an offer to anyone for a while. And then one other thing I want to talk about that came up at a few of our one-on-one meetings was communications. And so that is something that I've already started working on. There was discussion with board members around looking for ways to continue to communicate better with retirees and left two members. I think I said this to many of you, but you'd be surprised at how well the I'm blanking on the word, not the brochure, the mailing newsletter. Thank you. The newsletter does. We get just inundated with calls every time the newsletter goes out. So that has worked incredibly well. There's a high level of interest when that goes out, but looking for ways to engage, especially with younger members, and so I've already started working with Department of Retirement Systems because they've been doing some new innovative things. Do a plug for Seth Miller back there, his podcast that him and their communication staff has been doing. I really encourage everyone to, AJ did an episode. So if you want to hear AJ talk on the podcast about retirement, that was a good one. But looking at some other, working with them to partner with some other ways of communicating with members. One of those is they're working on doing these short videos that highlight real case retirement scenarios. That often that's what people want to know. They want to hear from other people, for left members, they want to hear what other firefighters and police officers have done, what decisions they made. It's this one-time event in your life, typically, where you have to make all of these huge decisions that impact the rest of your life and your family. And so hearing real examples of that could be helpful. And so DRS's communication staff has reached out to me, and we're working on developing some examples. And I'll probably talk to some of you because I'm trying to find people and won't necessarily use their real name and their exact situation. But trying to build some examples off real scenarios, and then I think continue to look for other areas where we could improve and try out some new communication methods for members. So excited about that. And then I'm going to hand it off to Steve.
We talked about this a little bit with each of you in the expectation interviews, and one of the questions that came up is how do we get a hold of Steve after April 1st? And one of the things that I said, and I said this to all of you, it's like, if you call me after April 1st or after, I am not going to pick up the phone. If it is a question that you absolutely positively feel cannot be answered by anyone except Steve, ask Jacob. And if Jacob agrees, nobody can answer that question but Steve, then Jacob will call me and I'll be picking up the phone for Jacob. And so we've got that transition. There were some, I thought there were some ideas that were pitched about like maybe retiring, but using my vacation time in the month of April and getting another month of service credit. And I was like, that's interesting. Except then it turns out I forgot. I picked April 1 as my retirement date because my vacation leave expires. So I wouldn't be able to use my vacation leave in April after all. So there was we talked about some potential things, but that's the clear break. And there are so many people out there that do have my contact information, email, cell phone. As just so that you're aware, if people reach out to me, I will be directing them to Jacob or to the ombudsman as appropriate. I'll be just clear with them. I retire, things change. You guys pass new left two laws every year. The legislature does. You guys have been recommending some every year, and they've been passing them. So things change, and they change quick. The answers that I would have given 10 years ago to somebody who had disability retirement questions are completely different than the answers they would get today. So I wouldn't be helping them even if I was trying to help them in a very quick. So that's the plan. Jacob and I will stay in touch. And then, but that is still the plan, is I'll be out of it. Dennis was asking earlier if I was going to be one of the showing up and wearing Hawaiian shirts in the audience and watching what you guys do. And no. So I'm planning on making as clean a break as absolutely possible, both out of, I've been doing this a long time. So one of the challenges is that there'll be people out there who've gotten comfortable working with me, and they might feel like, oh, I'll reach out to Steve because I don't know Jacob. That would be challenging for me or awkward for me to have that conversation. No, that wouldn't be good for Jacob. It wouldn't be good for the board. And so that break will be clean. Anybody that wants to call me and talk about the Mariners or the Seahawks or getting together for coffee, yeah, those are all good. But anything that has to do with left two, it will not be on the agenda. And that's our plan. And that'll last forever. We had questions come up during the expectation interviews and here recently about, hey, what was the board thinking when this bill was passed in 2012? I'm like, well, you know what? That might be in the future. That might be, that was before Jacob's time. It might be a question of, hey, do you remember what was going on then? What was, and yeah, that's fair game. But again, I'll be doing all of that with, and through Jacob. Also, there's been some ideas about post-retirement employment for Steve or employment opportunities. No, I don't plan on doing anything related to pensions or LEOFF. I've got my retirement plans, and I've got a lot of people have made those suggestions to me, or people who have, that old failure to launch where kids don't quite leave the house. There's a lot of retirees who have also failed to retire. And I've got a lot of friends who they're working more hours now for less money than they did before they retired. And so that's not my plan. It'll be a pretty clean break. But again, if there's something purely social, you'll be able to get a hold of me, but just nothing work related. Any questions or concerns about that plan?
Jake?
No concerns, no questions, just a couple comments. One is, I appreciate getting an update on the succession plan. I appreciate, Steve, the work that you're doing to kind of transition things to Jacob ahead of time so that he hits the ground running. And just to reinforce what you just said, two things wrong with calling Steve after April 1st. One is you've earned the right to retire, and I want you to have the best time in retirement. And two, doing that doesn't help Jacob. If we're calling Steve, then we're not helping Jacob grow as a leader, and that's not fair to Jacob. So you will only get a call from me if it's to grab a cup of coffee and talk Seahawks or Mariners. Otherwise, all of my comments and questions around this work will be directed to Jacob. And I'm just, again, excited for Jacob's transition. Steve, it's going to be hard to lose you, but I'm excited for you to move into retirement and to enjoy your retirement. So just thank you both.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. You guys have heard me say this. I've said it to 100 times in the last year. Jacob's going to do things Jacob's way, not Steve's way. But Jacob's way could be better. In many ways, I am absolutely 100% certain it will be better. There were challenges that the board faced that I had a skill set that was well suited to those challenges. With the challenges that you guys are going to be facing in the future, I think Jacob's skill set is better suited to those challenges than mine. So we're going to make sure this handoff goes clean. I'm not going to be holding on to the baton as Jacob's trying to run the next lap. And yeah, I appreciate all of your guys' support. And, you know, kudos back to Jacob. We have been talking about this for a while. Talked about it with other members of the team as well. They've been super supportive all throughout this. My goal was to give you guys at least one internal candidate that you felt could do this job. And I told Jacob he was on an extended job interview and he knocked it out of the park. And I appreciate all the support that you've given both of us now to go through this kind of process together. It's unusual. It doesn't usually happen this way, but I think this has been great. And again, thank you all.
So you're saying we're still meeting for coffee every Tuesday at your house?
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
Okay, good. All right. Any other questions? Okay, not seeing any on that one. Moving on. Chloe. It is. 2026 proposed board meeting calendar. Next month. Yeah, in December.
For the record, my name is Chloe Drosby, staff to the board. Okay, in your materials, you'll see the proposed 2026 board meeting calendar for your review. Typically, the board meets on the fourth Wednesday of each month. However, exceptions are made for education conferences, state holidays, and stakeholder outreach. The proposed calendar before you avoids larger stakeholder events, educational conferences, but please take a look at your calendars and let me know if you see conflicts that I haven't already noted. The board does not need to take action today, as you'll have the opportunity to adopt the 2026 meeting calendar during the November 19th board meeting. Thank you again for your time. And once again, please let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, you can email me in the next week or so if anything comes up.
Are there questions? Okay, deadline, when do you want the information by? So I know that.
If we can have it by the 10th of November, that would be the most helpful. Anytime before then is great as well. That's just our meeting material deadline.
Okay, so make sure we respond back to you.
That would be great. If there's any issues with it, otherwise, yeah, we'll adopt in November.
All right. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I forgot to continue the slides moving as I was
No, that's
talking,
good.
but here's these.
That was helpful for you to have that other page that showed the different things that were going on out there. So
Yeah,
it's helpful.
perfect.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 6 is the 2025 Executive Director Evaluation Process. Is that Karen? It is Karen. Didn't have a name there, but I assumed it was Karen. It is. Why?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Karen Durant, staff to the board, I am happy today to be your last presentation. Yay. This is going to be really quick. I just want to give you all a heads up on what's going to be coming to you in the next week or so. Steve's last evaluation process. So the first thing to note is we decided to move the date back a little bit to kind of coincide with the other positions that the board sets salary for. So the survey will go out to you all November 3rd, Monday. Responses will be due back Friday, November 14th. I will have a compiled response sent out to you all at least a week before the December board meeting. And then we will have the evaluation and executive session at the December 17th meeting. A part of that is always goals for the next year. So these goals will not be for Steve. These goals will be starting April 1st for Jacob. So it will be a 9-month period. So consider that when making your suggestions for goals. Once we get the goals, I usually visit with the admin committee to get what their top 3 or whatever may be appropriate, and then we will go from there. Does anybody have any questions on that? Otherwise, I just really appreciate, it's like a 15-20 minute evaluation. Just kind of getting on that and getting it out of the way. Also, if you have suggestions for a different process, different questions, different categories, please feel free to reach out. We're always in the business of process improvement. So yeah, any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, I'd encourage if anybody has a suggestion on how to best do this. I mean, we've talked about this for a couple of years. Do we want to tweak it one way or the other? We have built consistency in what we're doing, which is helpful. But at the same time, I imagine there's probably things out there that we could look to explore and do something different. So it's really about all of us and making sure that our team is working in the right direction. So if you have ideas, please let us know.
Also, for those that haven't been here through this, we have a 360 review process. So the board does an evaluation, the team does an evaluation, Steve does a self-evaluation. So all of those results will be compiled and sent to you. So I just wanted to make sure that you all know it's like a 3-pronged thing. Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, number 7 on our list is the public comment. And just so everybody's aware, staff received comments from Jared Yancer regarding possible legislation and distributed those comments to all board members in advance of today's meetings. They're inside your packet. We do appreciate individuals taking the time to reach out to us, and if they have questions or concerns, to let us know. And I believe that Steve, Jacob, you're going to be reviewing this at some point and respond accordingly.
Yes, we did review it when it came in. We have not responded. We wanted to talk with you if it was an issue that you might want a hearing on in November or not. In this particular case, though, the service credit that he is looking for and the potential change in legislation would involve PERS, not LEOFF. So with the consent of the board, we would respond to him that his concerns should be better addressed either through the Pension Funding Council or directly with the legislature, but that the board does not recommend changes to PERS.
That's correct. All right, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Are there anything else before our group today? That's the only comment that we had. Otherwise, we will be entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you. Our next meeting is November 19th, and we're here, so thank you very much. And again, get your homework done when they send it out to you.
Yeah, we did want to put out there, next one's November 19th, and the one after that we added for today because December 17th, just to let you guys start planning ahead around the holidays. The meetings are planned around the holidays.
Hey, thank you, everybody.